probably find one. Let me go.
Good people, allow me to greet you. It feels like we just left this space, but here we are back again, and it is a blessing to be able to see all of you here. Welcome to this annual meeting. I want to say just a word about the history here, because some of you are newer to the church, some of you have been a part of the church a whole lot longer than I have been a part of the church. And if you have, you know that the Congregational Meeting, the yearly Congregational Meeting, is part of Christ Church's tradition. What's a little different about it is that in its past iterations, it was also something called the United Methodist Church Conference, which by our Book of Discipline is a meeting that has to happen every year for the election of officers. Well, there's a different bishop in town and a different district superintendent in town, and the bishop and cabinet have made the decision that they want to do fall group church conferences. And so some of you I know were present in the fall, November more specifically, when many of us traveled to, maybe 25 of us traveled to Church of the Village for our church conference. So that's where all of the votes were taken. The elections of our church's leadership for 2025 took place there. But that leaves the question, okay, Bishop and Cabinet, if you're going to do church conferences that way, where's the opportunity for Christ Church as a congregation to have a bit of conversation about ministry and about the year that has been and the year that's on the horizon? So that's really the purpose of this. We're liberated from the need to take any votes. We're liberated from the need to debate anything that way, and this is simply an opportunity to have some conversation about where our church is in ministry and where our church might be headed in ministry. So thank you for your presence here today, and we'll simply treat this as an enjoyable conversation about church on a Sunday afternoon. Why don't we take a moment to catch our breath in prayer, and then we will sing together. It never ceases to amaze me, God, that you could have done this church thing in so many different ways. You didn't need us. You certainly didn't need us to accomplish your redemptive work in the world. You could have done that all on your own. But because of who you are, you have invited us into the good and redemptive things that you long to bring about in your world. So we give to you thanks for that. We give you thanks for the church around the world. And we give you thanks for this particular expression of the United Methodist Church, Christ Church, New York City. And you know my heart, God, you know how grateful I am for this place and for the ministry that we offer. But I also thank you for the way in which whenever we gather, even like this, it somehow feels like home. So today we ask you to draw near to us with your holy presence. Give to us a sense of your love and your grace. And as we celebrate, as we cast a bit of vision, draw us closer to one another, and at the same time draw us more deeply into your way and your truth and your life. and we will give to you all of the praise and all of the thanks. In Jesus and for his sake. Amen. Holy, holy, holy Lord God Almighty. Let's sing together. Thank you, Tara, for providing accompaniment. Hidden behind the organ, but never forgotten, is Tara Lynn Rivetti Park. Holy, 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 Lord God Almighty, early in the morning our song shall rise to thee. Holy, 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 merciful and mighty, God in three persons, blessed Trinity. Holy, 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 all the saints adore thee, casting down their golden crowns around the glassy sea. Cherubim and seraphim falling down before thee, who was and is and evermore shall be. Holy, 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 Lord God Almighty, all thy works shall praise thy name in earth and sky and sea. Holy, 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 merciful and mighty, God in three persons, blessed Trinity. Always good to sing with you, friends. I did want to say a word of welcome to those who might be joining us. This is being live streamed, and so I know that there are folks who were planning on watching from some other place, so welcome to you as well. Glad for your presence. I'm hoping that also includes our Washington Heights congregation. I know that many of them were preparing to watch their worship service, which is at 12 o'clock. I think worship ran a little bit long today, and so there were some that were hoping to be here. That might still happen, but I think the last I heard, there were folks who were watching online. So welcome to Christ Church in both of its campuses. So, in terms of conversation, here's a conviction of mine. We'll see if you agree with it. So I was a district superintendent for 10 years of my ministry, and somehow it doesn't seem that long because it was divided up into 2 5-year segments separated by another pastoral appointment in a local church. But when I would go to the church conference, and I always did individual church conferences, one of the things that I would ask the congregation to do is to celebrate. Just, can you take a moment and celebrate with me where you've seen God and the Spirit of God moving in the life of the church? Just anyone, talk with me. And so I would ask congregations to do that, and more times than I care to add up, the congregations would find that such an incredibly difficult thing to do. It's as though they hadn't been asked to celebrate anything. And it was always such a discouragement to me, because I would say, well, tell me how you feel about worship. Well, we like the music, or we like the pastor. And it would be that sort of conversation. And it's led me to believe that congregations get to a point where it is a whole lot easier for them to voice or air their grievances than it is to celebrate the good things that God is bringing about. And so it made sense to me in this conversation to take a little bit of time just to celebrate, just a few minutes to celebrate. And you might have some things that you want to celebrate as well. But some of our staff, because of previous commitments, could not be here today. We're missing Steve Pilkington, we're missing Roseanne DeGennaro. But I'm grateful for the staff members who are here, And I'm going to invite your friend and mine, Reverend Tyler Heston, to come. And I'll just ask you, Tyler, what are some of the things that you are celebrating? Come on.
Well, I am celebrating a ton, not least of which Coco loves Christ Church. So if you were here last week, I was going to say she's a convert, but she got blessed by a rabbi, so she might actually be Jewish and not Christian, but Jesus was a Jew too, so I guess it's more biblically accurate. No, I wrote 3 things down when I thought about what I wanted to celebrate, particularly from my realm of ministry of spiritual formation and LGBTQIA+ development. I'm not celebrating a shorter job title because I like how long it is, but if you know me, you know that I have a hunch that queerness and spirituality may actually be 2 sides of the same coin. We can talk about some papers I want to write about that later, but I love my job because the 2 things go hand in hand. So these 3 things I see, 3 words I wrote down in terms of celebration, really connect to both what we do as spiritual formation and LGBTQIA+ development. 3 things I'm celebrating today are our retreats, our public witness, and our collaboration. So how many of you were at either our fall retreat or our beloved community day retreat a couple weeks ago? Yeah, so not all of us, because we're Christ Church and we all do many things, but a good portion of our congregation was at our fall retreat last November, which we've been doing for years, but this was my 2nd retreat that I've gotten to lead since joining staff, and it was magic. So we spent 2 days away upstate, just an hour north of the city, on kind of a fateful weekend. It was the weekend after the election, like right after, one of those where we didn't even know if we were going to have results when we showed up to Camp Olmsted. And the whole weekend we centered around John 15's passage that says, "Abide in me and I abide in you," thinking about what a spiritual discipline of abiding in God's presence might mean. Katie Pagenkopf made for us a handmade prayer labyrinth, which you may have seen at some of our other events throughout the year. But that labyrinth, which if you don't know what a labyrinth is, it looks like a maze, but there's only one way in and one way out. It's been a contemplative practice for centuries for Christians and other people across the globe to think about how God abides in us as we wind through what often feels like a maze of life, ultimately unto a center and back out into the world. But it was truly magic to see that retreat be a place that people from all different backgrounds, all different ages and stages of life could connect around a true sense of depth and spirituality. It was more than just a weekend away, more than just fun, more than escapism, even with the ways that the world is unfolding, but really was a chance to practice presence together. And I think you can talk to anyone who went on that retreat that sense of presence has been a way that we've stayed buoyed over the past few months. But I've had conversations with some of you who did not go on the retreat about how even that retreat kind of suffused something into our life beyond the life of those who went on the retreat itself. We did another day retreat with the Beloved Community Ministry a few weeks ago on a Saturday morning that caught some of the same dynamic depth and presence. But I want to save some of that conversation for later. So even beyond that one retreat, even beyond the 30-something people who got to show up in person, I think the retreats that we're doing is reverberating throughout our whole community life, and that's something I am very much celebrating. Second thing I'm celebrating is our public events that we are doing. So I'm thinking specifically of our Pride events that I'm working towards right now, and a day retreat that we're doing with the LGBTQ ministry. But last October, we hosted an All Hallows Eve service that was kind of a brainchild, something I had been wanting to do even before I moved to New York, but had said that and heard it reflected back to me by some people in the room, many people in the church, that that's a good idea. I mean, we did this unique experimental, we never really call it a worship service, but you very much could have called it a worship service on Halloween, celebrating the sacred history. Halloween is a Christian term. Hallows Eve is All Saints Eve. So celebrating the Christian connections while also thinking about what we might be able to learn from the other connections in and around Halloween, from the ways in which Halloween is a queer holiday by some rubrics, and learning from voices that may have something to teach us as Christians about what the holiday might mean. But what I loved about All Hallows Eve was it was a public event. It was an event that was great for those of us who have been coming to Christ Church for decades, and welcoming for people who may not have stepped foot in church in years. And out of the 50-ish people who were there, it was a true spectrum. And I've seen some of that reflected in our longest night service, some of the other services that we've done. But that moment particularly showed something that I think we're growing into too as a church, that we can create these unique worship spaces that make sense for those of us who have been doing church, especially in the way that we do church here, for years, but also connect to people for whom church may not be a safe word. One of the things I really loved about All Hallows Eve was we welcomed in La Zabaleta, who is a successful drag queen, has been on some TV shows about drag, was a part of another photo shoot that we hosted here in the sanctuary that we could talk about some other time. But La Zabaleta, we invited to come offer a drag performance at that service, and they are not a religious person necessarily. Their mom came, and that was lovely to see them really connect with it. But not only does this as a public event, and I see this in other things that we are doing, more than just a witness of who we are for the world, which very much was a witness of who we are for people who may not have otherwise found themselves in a church on Halloween, it was also a chance for us to listen and celebrate voices from outside of the church. I think we, especially at Christ Church, are uniquely poised to be doing that type of cultural production, to use some language I use in seminary a lot, creating these experiences that bring meaning and depth for us in the church and for those outside, in this way that's not just us telling other people what we think, but also making space to listen for others. And so I'm excited to see what else we might do with these public forward LGBTQ spiritual formation events. But the last thing I'm celebrating too is that through all of these things and more, I'm seeing more and more collaboration and more opportunities to connect with our sibling churches like Church of the Village, St. Paul, St. Andrew. We're doing a field trip to SPSA with the confirmation youth in a few weeks. But right now in the works, we have a couple of LGBTQ ministry events in particular. One little workshop with Church of the Village in a couple of weeks. And then in May, we just started planning another day retreats with Marble Collegiate Church on 29th and Broadway, a church that I think shares a lot of DNA with who we are. It doesn't necessarily have the capacity to be doing LGBTQ ministry. There's not a ministry of LGBTQ development, I think, at any other church in the world, but any other church here in New York. And using the resources we have, using my role in particular to help provide ministry that's more than just, well, there's not much going on in churches in New York City, so let's do things together, but instead doing things that are growing ministry and connecting with other people. There are some cool things in the works that I think will show who we are at Christ Church and helps us use the resources that we have with abundance and with celebration. And in an era in which people say church is dying, maybe some things are dying that need to die. I think what we're doing here at Christ Church shows that things are being reborn too, and we're not doing that alone. So, yeah, retreats, publicity, collaboration, I'm celebrating.
You know, it's an interesting thing to think, Tyler, you've been here for what, a year and a half?
18 months.
Yeah, for sure. And what a significant impact. Thank you for who you are and what you have brought to us, friend. Just received a text from Mickey. He's caught up in things at Washington Heights, so he's not here to speak from his heart, but is here certainly in spirit. But I'll tell you who is here, Lydia Prather. And speaking of impact over the last year and a half, Lydia is our Director of Ministry for Children, Youth, and Families. And I'll simply invite her to come and share some of the good things that are on her heart to share. Would you greet Lydia?
Hi, everybody. I have a lot. I've been celebrating, to be celebrated. I would say the biggest one from this year, as short as it's been so far, has been the addition of youth ministries to my job, which has been such a gift already, and everything that we're doing and planning to do this year. I just came from youth group, in fact, where we were pushing each other down the hall in the wheelie chair from my office and talking about friendship and talking about, friendships and what that looks like, what God wants for us in that. And it's been a really good bonding time. But looking back on things to celebrate from 2024, it was definitely a blessed year of growth in the children's and families ministry. So even if you weren't able to catch how much kids ministry has grown, because we just walk out of the sanctuary Sunday mornings, you can't miss it when they sing in choir with how big the choir ministry is now. And some of the highlights of my year last year were the Christmas Christmas pageant, which is basically my Super Bowl or my World Series. And this Advent was my second time directing and leading, writing the pageant with the kids. And the numbers from my first year to the second year, we had 30 kids participate in the pageant this year, or this last year, which was unbelievable. Another program so near and dear to my heart is Vacation Bible School, which we did for the first time, and we had a blast being heroes for God's purpose with so much staff participation, so many wonderful volunteers participating, and also I celebrate every day of my life the volunteers for children's ministry, how committed everyone is to Sunday school and to anything for youth group now, and that people are everyone, they're there. They're basically fighting each other to be the volunteer in the room on Sundays, which is nothing but a gift to be celebrated. So one of my very favorite traditions that I brought back last year was actually the presentation of Bibles. And my favorite outcome of the kids getting their Bibles actually came from Maxim, Simi and Kingsley's son, who actually I think is here. Is Maxim in here too? Yeah, so Maxim's in here. I'm going to talk about you. So I know Maxim treasures the Bible that he received and is actively reading it because he will bring up the stories that he's currently reading in the Bible he got during the time when we're talking about the scripture we're doing on Sundays. And it might not always be like the smoothest connection that I make, but I am willing to fight the fight to make that connection work because I treasure knowing that Maxim is reading his Bible and that it is an important part of his life. But I will always welcome those confusing transitions and connections because they are just things that I am celebrating all through my week. And I'm telling everyone, my husband Danny hears these stories. He's like, yes, I remember. And I'm like, but we've got to talk about the kids. So these are just a few of the activities and the events and the things that I've been celebrating this entire last year to this year. And I really look forward to sharing with you what we're going to be celebrating for this year when we talk again next year. So thank you.
It must surely be a testament to Lydia's leadership that of all the vacation Bible schools I've been a part of over the course of my life, I don't think I've ever remembered a theme song, like the Vacation Bible School theme song, but I just called it to mind yesterday during the talent show. By the way, Lydia organized a wonderful little talent show, and not a large group just yet, but let me tell you, the talent among our children and youth is stunning in the life of this church, and we got to experience that. So, but anyway, I called it to mind with Tara, and I said, I wonder if I can remember that. Oh yeah, Hero Hotline. So yeah, it's still there. I think that bears witness to Lydia's leadership and the energy that she brings to it. Thank you, Lydia, so much. We're grateful for you. And speaking of impact, somebody who has had an impact in the life and ministry of Christ Church for a number of years now, in some ways, with the exception of a couple, a senior staff member in the life of Christ Church, and that's Brandon Batson. Brandon, come and talk with us, please.
Hey, everybody. I just think that celebration is such a huge part of what I want our church culture to be about. And I think sometimes we forget, we look at all the things that are going on in the life of this church and we forget to really just celebrate how special this place is, how special the people are, how special our volunteers are, how special our staff is, and we just forget to celebrate sometimes what we have here and how special it is. And I've also just been celebrating some things from my area that I'd like to share with you as well, which is our online presence. I don't know if you guys have ever checked the numbers or are interested in that sort of thing, but each week we are approaching 60 concurrent viewers during the worship service. So that means people that stay with us all throughout the worship service. So that means in addition to the people who are here in the room, there's 60 people online each week minimum that are watching along with us throughout the whole service. In addition to that, around 400 unique individuals engage our services sometime during the week, and 128 of those viewers stay with us for over 30 minutes of their watching. So when you start looking at these numbers, I was at a mega church here in the city, and we had nowhere near that kind of engagement as far as time goes. We may have had 1,500, 2,000, 3,000 views, but nobody stayed for longer than 15 seconds. So the idea that you had 30 minutes average for 120 of the views that you get on a service is, not only are we not ending up in a lot of algorithms, people are searching out our content, 128 people a week. So just to think about that, and what I get from that is that we just have to continue to think about growth in this area. We have to think about investing in technology and the volunteers that we'll take to grow this part of our ministry, and that it's just a vital part of any future ministry in New York or elsewhere. Secondly, our in-person ministries are also flourishing, especially because our volunteer numbers are rising across the board. At Sharing Table, thanks to the leadership of Ben here, greeting and ushering, the return of our 9 a.m. ushering team, just there's growth everywhere, and these ministries have contributed to our community by hosting events like the Wisdom of Our Ancestors Day Retreat, Summer Streets, Blessing of the Animals, I just skipped. Sorry, that's the next thing I was going to talk about. Sorry. If I don't have a guitar on, I have a really hard time speaking to people at a microphone. So next time I'm just going to bring it with me. But yeah, we've just experienced the most successful Easter and Christmas seasons that we've had since the pandemic. That's all because of our volunteer teams in my mind. And so third, the thing I want to celebrate is our circle ministries that continue to grow. Beloved Community, Creation Care, Elder Sages, Theology on Tap have all provided meaningful spaces for connection, learning, and growth. Over the past year, these ministries have contributed to our community by hosting events like the Wisdom of Our Ancestors Day Retreat, Summer Streets, Blessing of the Animals, and many more. And these gatherings remind us that faith is lived out in our relationships. And today, I want to thank every single person here in the room that gives of your time and energy to Christ Church as a volunteer. Whether you're serving at Sharing Table, ushering and greeting, preparing for meetings, leading groups, serving on a committee, setting up for an event, or making a dish for a coffee hour, you are what makes this church run. You're what makes it interesting. You're what keeps us going. You're what encourages the staff. I want to say thank you from the bottom of my heart, from the bottom of our staff's heart. Today I want to take just a moment to honor one special volunteer, because I think that we don't take time to honor the people who really do the work around here, who really give of their time and effort. And the person I want to honor today is Jay Rice. He was one of the first people that I ever met here at Christ Church. My first lunch meeting was with Jay Rice, of any person in the congregation. And he works tirelessly week in, week out, to make sure that our ushers and greeters are scheduled. He's been doing it since before I was a staff member here, since before Eric was pastor here. But I don't even know how many years, honestly. I only know about the time that, yes, but a lot of years. And just, you have been faithful. You have overseen that group. You've helped me out in ways. You've always been a person who's just been ready to jump in no matter what. And I just want to honor you today, man. I have a gift for you. I want to hug your neck and tell you I love you.
Just a couple of things. I haven't heard "I'm going to hug your neck" since I lived in North Carolina, and that's just it takes me back. That's a great phrase. I'm going to hug on your neck. And Jay, yeah, I don't need another reason to love Jay, but I'll give you just this. He's also a comic book guy. I don't know if you know that about him. So there's just a lot going on. And so when I think about ushers and greeters, and I'm so thankful that we've taken time to honor that, I try to say this to folks: you're the first impression oftentimes, unless people have done a lot of research online. You're the first in-person connection that people are often going to have with a church if they're coming to visit. And I say that to people not to intimidate them, but to remind them there's urgency in that. It's some of the most urgent ministry that we offer, and that there's somebody, Jay, who's willing to bring a depth of heart to that and a depth of care. That's the kind of thing that helps us to offer the hospitality that is on our heart to offer. So thank you for your leadership, and I hope you heard what Brandon said. Without our volunteer, what sometimes called our unpaid servants, we wouldn't be able to make it as a church. We wouldn't be able to offer any of our ministries. So thanks to all of you, and I know I'm looking at people who wear multiple hats in the volunteer department. So thank you for the way that you give of your time and your energy so beautifully and so sacrificially in the life of the church. Well, there's somebody who continues to do that now in staff capacity, but when it comes to paving the way for volunteer leadership, Ben Jordan has done that in ways that are significant. And one of the first persons that I met coming here. So Ben, come and talk with us about what you're celebrating today.
Yeah, it's been such an honor to be in this coordinator hospitality role official capacity. This has been a wonderful experience. As you see, these seats are filling up more than ever lately. So exciting. But the better part is that when church is over, they stick around. That's when the extra work happens. And we take it home, you know. And we've had some exciting changes with Coffee Hour, as you've seen, and a lot more to come. And all of you are sticking around for that, which makes it better, and welcoming new people. And a lot of those new people are turning into members quickly. And not only members, more than ever, we're having newer faces sticking around to volunteer and to get active in the church, which is essential. And and just really enjoying themselves on there. And with the grace of Lydia, tons of new families, as we're seeing, and 40 children running around, or whatever the number is. It feels wonderful down there. It's more inspiration to have fuller tables and put out more chairs, and just what a great environment with music playing in the background and activities, and there's endless amount of things that we could be doing at Coffee Hour. So just expect a lot more. And then later in the evening, we have Sharing Table, which has been going really well. We have 7 new lead volunteers in the last couple of months. So very thankful for them. Many of them are in the room right now. We have 1 new cook who comes with experience, so that is very important. Looking for more, of course. And then volunteer, the general volunteers, we have tons of new people, a lot of people that have nothing to do with the church, who have found us through various ways that I've put us online. They're coming and they return and keep volunteering. I've had groups from different schools and organizations come. But the thing is we need about 10 of those general volunteers a week. So we need all of you to sign up. And that has to keep happening. We're feeding like 120 to 160 people a week. And that requires a lot of work. I know almost everyone here has done that and been there, and we just need you to keep helping us there. Methodist Home, we had a great year last year, tried out some new things, continue to have wonderful support from Eric and Tara, and that's anything we do, they're really happy, so we're going to keep trying those things. And great news, we've raised the money we need to renovate the garden. So that'll be fully renovated by the end of May. Phase 1, we're getting bold, and we're going to go into phase 2 and make it even better. So that's that. And then this summertime, we're going to try a bunch of new things, and of course, Summer Streets, make that even bigger. So keep an ear out. Thanks.
Just hearing these voices, I hope you never get tired of hearing me say it, but I so celebrate our church staff, and I know you do as well. And we're an interesting crew, and I say this about church staffs. Nobody ever enters into church ministry to maximize their earning potential. They just don't. Our SBRC does, I think, a great job of caring for our staff, but nobody enters ministry to become wealthy, financially wealthy. And yet, there is this life-changing engagement, this life-changing ministry in which we share together. Some of us in full-time capacity, some of us in part-time capacity, some more behind the scenes, some front and center. And part of what makes us an interesting crew, and you know this, is that we've got folks who've been on staff for 35 years. And then we have folks who've been on staff for, a number of months, or 2 years, or 3 years. And that leads to some challenges, but I really do believe that we're staff members who love one another. And I wouldn't say that if I didn't believe it. And I've been a part of church staffs where I was not able to say that. And my conviction is that if people truly love one another, there are ways to appreciate one another and to care well for one another. And I'm so proud of our staff for the way that we do that, even when there's disagreement or differing visions of what needs to happen. And so I hope that the staff knows how grateful I am for them, and that whenever there's an opportunity to celebrate, I'm quick to celebrate the staff that works so hard on behalf of this church. So I hope he will forgive me, because I had it in my mind that I wanted to include the name of Michael Tofty because he is a candidate for ministry in the life of Christ Church. Now, saying that, and I get goosebumps saying it because Michael has been navigating just the complex rhythms of candidacy in the New York Annual Conference, and that's no small thing. There's a lot of work that needs to be done in caring for that, and just getting somebody to respond to an email sometimes, and you would think that it would be really easy. Oh, someone wants to be in ministry, we'll do it, but it's not always that way in our institutions. But I really celebrate Michael. He's become a friend, and hearing his story, if you haven't had the opportunity to get to know him, he's so plugged in ministry in the life of the church here in a lot of ways. But if ever you have the opportunity to sit down and say, hey, tell me why in the world you're thinking about this, and he'll tell you, and it's a compelling story. I've heard the story in writing. I've heard the story through his voice. It's an amazing thing. There will come a time sometime soon when we will have to call a bona fide church conference to approve Michael's candidacy for ministry. He'll have to meet with the SBRC, and then come before us as a church conference. So you will have the opportunity to act on him in an official capacity. We're not ready to do that yet, but I wanted to celebrate Michael and to celebrate his willingness to say a courageous yes to God's absurd and life-altering call. Is that a good way of putting it, Michael? All right, good. We celebrate you, my friend, and we're praying for you. And I also want to say just a brief word to celebrate our retired clergy who relate to the life of this church. And that's always on my heart to do, because I am the son of a United Methodist pastor who retired one day. And I remember what that experience was like for him. And these retired clergy in so many ways have paved the way for those of us who have come after. And so I'm thankful for the 4 United Methodist clergy persons that relate to Christ Church in retirement. Reverend Richard Allen, who at one time was a part of the Christ Church staff in terms of congregational care. But Richard has reconnected with us, and for that I'm grateful. Reverend John Cole, who has had such significant ministry, and if you don't know this, please be in prayer for Polly, because Polly's facing a number of health challenges, and it was so good to see John in worship today, but I could tell from his countenance, he's carrying a lot of weight that way as he cares for Polly in the midst of it. Lucy Porter, I don't know how many of you knew that Lucy was ordained United Methodist clergy and ordained deacon here in the New York Annual Conference. And then Reverend Dick Pusateri, who is so much a part of the life of Christ Church and its ministry. But I'm thanking God as I stand here and celebrating these folks that every once in a while simply engage in a conversation rather spontaneously, and I'll learn something. And these are folks who have forgotten more about ministry than I will ever know. And I'm grateful to have them. I feel their encouragement, I feel their presence, and I'm so thankful to have them in the life of the church. Yeah, please, thank you. Yeah. And I'll just take a couple of moments, and we were going to, but real in popcorn fashion, is there anything, we've been celebrating a lot, anything that you simply want to name and celebrate? You have to speak up pretty loudly, and then I'll repeat anything that you say, anything that's on your heart to say. I'm grateful that Christ Church experienced this in 2024, or I'm grateful for one thing or another. Anything at all? Yes, please, Liza.
The growth of our parish choir.
Oh my goodness. The growth of our parish choir in number and in quality. Absolutely.
Members of the church have come. I think we've had people join parish choir. Members of the church. So Amanda and Tara.
Yeah, absolutely. Celebrating, of course, I mean, we have these incredible music ensembles, but it has been such an amazing blessing to see our parish choir grow in quality and in number. And it's not to say that prior to this growth that they were not offering beautiful music, but you just sense the energy that numbers can sometimes bring. So thank you for that, Liza. That is a great, great word. And Amanda Smith does such incredible work. And Tara comes home and she says, well, you know, I've been around a few musicians in my time as well. And I've always said the only people who surpass church musicians in eccentricity are the clergy. That's the only, that's my way of thinking about it. So I've been around church musicians a lot, and I've been around church choirs a lot. And Amanda brings, I'll say, how was choir practice? And Tara will say, Amanda she cares for us so well, and she's so patient with us, and she is so gracious with us. So Liza, thank you for celebrating the music ministry of the parish choir and the growth therein. Thank you. Anyone else? Yes, please.
You know, the bell choir has shrunk because our Christ Church members have had different things happening in their lives and they've had to leave. But because Christ Church is a church that advertises, we've gotten people to come ring with us.
Yes.
We're now members of the church. And one of our members, Elizabeth, just had a baby boy son.
Wow. Thank you, Winona. Celebration of our continuing bell choir and new life in more ways than one coming through the bell choir. So thank you for celebrating that. Anyone else? Yes, ma'am.
I'll just say your leadership.
Oh,
The change in the church. That was so significant. Your message to that.
thank you, Beth. Thank you. Thank you for, it's a kind word of affirmation that you're offering to me, and so my honor to be alongside you, friend, but thank you for your deep heart in celebrating what is on your heart to celebrate. Anyone else? Yes, ma'am.
This is more of a small moment, but 2 Sundays ago in the hymn where there was no accompaniment.
Yes.
And we were just singing together, and there was no like organ or piano, and it was just kind of like felt it right here in my core.
I love it.
Togetherness.
Okay, so I love it when moments of worship stand out, and what Laura is celebrating is that there was a hymn, and Steve intentionally dropped out of that just to allow us to enjoy and experience the worshipful music of our voices without accompaniment. And I thank you for mentioning that, because worship happens so frequently that sometimes I lose sight of those individual moments. So yeah, I'm right there with you in terms of music helping us to experience the presence of God in different ways and in creative ways. So thank you, Laura. Yes, please, Janice.
Just to build on that, I think Steve Pilkington really understands worship.
Yes, he does.
He brings so much to it every Sunday. This Sunday was a great example. You know, he does different things. I mean, he lives it.
He does. It's nothing inauthentic about that for Steve. And so a celebration of Steve Pilkington and his leadership, and in the music ministry of Christ Church, I certainly add my voice and heart to that. Did I see anyone else? Yes, I'll come here and then we'll come over here. Yes, Janet.
I just want to say that from the conversations and people I've talked to all year, I think with your leadership and Tyler and this amazing staff, like there is so much energy
Yeah.
in the congregation that wasn't here 2 years ago. You know, and that's no reflection
Nope.
on
Yep.
prior ministry or anything. It's just I feel like there's a revitalization and
Yeah.
an energy that has come over the last couple of years, and it's amazing. And
Yep.
I've been a member here for a very long
You have, yes, you have, yeah.
And it's just, it's a renewal, and it's really wonderful. And I hear it from a lot of people, that's what the experience is.
So a celebration of the energy that finds all kinds of expression here, and the excitement, and you sense it. And that word of celebration is coming from our lay leader, and that would be enough. But hearing from our lay leader is always a good thing because she's our lay leader, Janet. But hearing it from Janet's heart simply because it's Janet is even better. So thank you, Janet, for speaking into that and for naming that. Someone over here. Yes, please, Jeff.
For me, I know we've already mentioned Tyler, and Tyler said a lot as well that was very important, but I have to give him a lot of celebration because without him, many of us who are queer in the church would not have a voice in leadership, and to have him in the pulpit many times as well is a really impactful thing for a lot of us who never thought we would see that.
Yeah.
And never thought we would even be accepted in a church.
Yeah.
Able to thrive and flourish as our true selves. And that means a ton. And the energy as well as the personality and compassion that he brings to the position is, I can't put it into words. I am so thankful.
Thank you, Jeff. Yeah, sure. Amen to all of that, Jeff, and thank you for speaking your heart into that. And, we in church leadership are experts at deflection, and I always want to say I always want to make sure that you make it a point to hear what was said and that you receive that into the depths of who you are, because that's somebody whose life you have impacted, and I want you to know that and celebrate that even in your own heart. So thank you, Jeff, for making that possible, and a word of affirmation for Tyler. And then we'll come back to Michael and then come up to Beth.
Yeah, I just want to say a quick thanks as well for, I know we heard from Lydia earlier, and I know Tyler was also helpful, as well as Jeff. What I really appreciate is over the past year and a half, 2 years, I still can't believe I am helping with kids ministry. My parents on a weekly basis are surprised, but that's a good portion. There's many stories of that, but there's a good portion that is the intentionality that Lydia has brought to this of thinking both how can we display and spotlight our kids in ministry and in this congregation, whether that's us receiving communion first and thinking of new ways to do that, or sitting at the front so that way everyone sees the kids leave instead of in the back. Or
Yeah.
I know Jeff did a flag and banner that we did last year, spotlighting, but also the incorporation of confirmation after several years after COVID.
Yep.
Lydia and Tyler created that, and you see that in the fact that we just had a family baptized.
Yeah.
That has become such a close-knit member of our kids' ministry a few weeks ago. I really appreciate that. It brings a lot of life, it brings a lot of youth, and it shows that there's a huge future here in the church.
Amen.
Think about the future.
Amen, Michael. Thank you. A celebration for those of you who didn't maybe hear all the details of that, a true celebration of our children's ministry, our youth ministry, and what that represents for not only our present, but also our future. So thank you, Michael. Beth.
Real quick, just for Brandon, with the online stuff. No, because my dad was part, he struggles in the church, really does.
Yeah.
He doesn't connect to the pastor, but having that service, he's one of the 400 or something people that watch it during the week.
Well, and I'll tell you, I know the church, Beth, so part of what's being celebrated is our online ministry, and that people from all different places can check in. I get these phone calls from, when I say all around the world, I mean all around the world, of somebody who experienced our worship service and wants to respond to it, wants to offer something. So it's an amazing thing, and I've come to believe that part of God's redemption of the mess of COVID is that churches that even, I know Christ Church offered online ministry prior to that, but my sense is that COVID forced the church to move into new depth that way and new professionalism, and that doesn't happen easily. And it wouldn't have happened here without Brandon's leadership and Brandon's oversight. So thank you, Brandon, for and hear that you're helping families that sometimes feel really struggle. They feel a sense of struggle in their church connection, and they're connecting with us that way. So celebrating that. Yes, Ben, please.
I want to celebrate the energy in the Northex on a Sunday morning. And that's part usher, part the children's ministry, but there's a lot of other people up there that there's so much joy. And yes, we get loud. That's the point. We're in there. And these people that are coming here the first time, some people haven't been in a church in a long, long time. Some come in with their families and they're like, what are we walking into? And there's so much warmth they're coming into.
Yeah.
And everyone that's up there is so happy to see those faces. There's some people that not everyone there recognizes the people coming in, but there's people come every Sunday. And we have to whisper each other what their name is. We're all in there together, and they're immediately are hit with how much of a family we are. And you can't beat that.
Amen. Well, you sense what there is to celebrate, and I hope you're hearing some of these different words, and I hope that they're reminding you of what it is that God is accomplishing in our midst. And keep these conversations going when you're talking about all the other things, and heaven knows there are plenty of other things to talk about in this world at present. But don't forget to have good conversations to celebrate what you see happening in a church community that I know is dear to your heart. It's an important discipline, celebration. So we're going to move to a time of information, and I'll ask you to turn to page 2 if you are not there already, just so that it is before you. I have gotten in my first 2 years so many questions about, well, is there going to be a year-end report, a financial report that's going to explain? And I give Roseanne credit for this. She's really helped me to figure out a template that works, because keep in mind, the last time I took a math course was in my junior year of high school. So it has been a number of years. If you're looking for complex math, I'm not your person. But I certainly understand the math that this represents. And so on page 2, what you have, we won't necessarily go over this in detail, but you have these you have the total expenditures, so that if you have questions about how in 2024 was our giving spent, how were our resources spent, this is as detailed a report as we are able to give. And you see how we have created these sections: clergy and music ministry staff compensation, program staff compensation, office building staff compensation, mission apportionment to the United Methodist Church, I'll come back to that in a minute, ministries of program and spiritual formation, ministries of outreach, and building and property costs. So that our total expenditures were in 2024 $2,792,767. But back to that mission apportionment, some people wonder what that is. It's an interesting thing to be part of a denomination, and I always want you to know about this, but you see the percentage of the total expenditures that represents, usually around 10%. There's a formula in the annual conference that is applied to every church. Worship attendance, budget goes into that formula. But I always like to think about this as the church's tithe to the United Methodist Church's global ministry. Now, there are cynics, and I've encountered them, especially as a district superintendent, who said, oh, don't call it a tithe, it's a tax. It's a church tax. And because I am more of a word guy than a math guy, words matter. And if we call something a tax, that's going to impact the way we think about it, especially this time of year, right? It's going to impact the way we think about it. But a tithe is something that we offer. And I have thought about the connectional apportionment differently. You see, if you look at the bullet points that outline how the connectional apportionment is spent, it covers some unglamorous things, conference electric bills and district superintendent salaries and things, things that, nobody's making a church banner about those things. But if you look at that first category, 20.4% of this apportionment funds vital world mission and ministry funds, including the World Service Fund, Ministerial Education Fund, Episcopal Fund, Black College Fund, and General Administration Fund, and including the Africa University Fund. It brings me to this point, and I might have shared this with some of you, but many years ago, the cabinet from Western Pennsylvania traveled to Zimbabwe, and we visited Africa University in Mutare. And I was at the parking lot, and I hear, wait, some college student from across running over and out of breath, and he says, are you the clergy, are you the cabinet from Western Pennsylvania? And I said, yes, we're district superintendents, this is our bishop. And as soon as he caught his breath, he said, would you please tell your people that I'm going to college only because of our denomination's apportionment. I'm going to college, and I want you to tell them that I'm going to become a doctor, and I'm going back to my village, and I'm going to help my village to be healthier. Now that goes beyond paying an electric bill. That's the ministry of the United Methodist Church. And our brand has taken some hits over the years. I know that. We've been dealing with a lot of issues. But that's been somewhere very close to the heart of who we are. So when you think about our connectional apportionment, and when you think how much that represents, we could use that money in some other ways. Yeah, but it connects us to something significant that God is doing around the world in and through the United Methodist Church. So that's why I'm really proud to be a part of a church that has prioritized paying that, and paying that in full, because many churches, when they're taking a look at their struggles, that's the first thing to go. Well, we have to care for ourselves, but we'll let the denomination go. I celebrate that I'm a part of a church that prioritizes that in our giving, and I wanted you to know about that. Oh, the other part of it is that, my insurance is covered by the church as a United Methodist elder. Staff has insurance, but retired United Methodist clergy, because they don't serve a church, how does their insurance get covered if there's any gap before, the things that need to be navigated that way? And another thing that the connectional apportionment covers are any insurance needs for our retired United Methodist clergy. And as the child of one of those, when my dad's health began to fail, never was I more grateful for a church that cares well for its clergy leaders, even in retirement. Those are some of the things that are covered by connectional apportionment. So, any questions about that before we turn to the next page, just in terms of how expenditure happens? I probably won't be able to answer the questions if you have them like Roseanne would, but I can at least do my best. Then, if you want to take a look at the other side of the math, you will see on page 3 the income in 2024. And you will see that the congregational, this is very important to understand, and it was surprising to me that so many people who've been around the church maybe weren't clear about this, but we have a number of what I would call resourcing streams or funding streams. The congregational offering, you see, in 2024 was $937,468. And if you skip down to the middle of the page, you will see that that's about $52,000 more than we gave last year. And I'm pausing to celebrate that, because every other church with whom I've been in communication about their giving trends, it's been going in the other direction. And still good ministry happening, but the giving has been moving in the other direction. So $52,000 might not sound like much, but celebrate that people believe in the ministry of the church enough to want to give to it. And I think that indicates the generous heart of our people. So you see the congregational offering is 35% of our total income in 2024. Investment income from our air right investments, dollars from our air rights, you'll see at present covers 32% of our income. And some people will say to me, if they don't know, oh, well, you have all these millions of dollars, over $30 million, you're just choosing not to spend it. I've heard that from some people. I would simply say to you, that's one way of looking at it. That is one way of looking at it. What I've learned after 2 years of living in Manhattan is that $32 million does not, it sounds like a lot, but when it comes to buildings, that would not last very long. So you would not have to hear anything about money for probably a few years, and we could simply spend that money down. But I hope you begin to see that when we do that, we're impacting significantly one of our most dependable funding streams. So you can do that, you can spend down our investment, but if you do that, then you are limiting our long-term vision for how we can steward our resources for continuing ministry. So when you hear that kind of narrative, speak into that, hang on to this material and say, yeah, but before you go spreading that, understand that we're not saying, well, we're not spending our money. No, we're trying to maximize our resources for the long-term health of our ministry. And that is critically important to understand. We get a facility apportionment from the Christ Church Day School to the tune of 17% of our total income, $450,000 plus. And you see the Mission Gala, which represents 10% of our total income, and then building use, 6%. Those are fees for groups using the building, for a total income in 2024 of $2,670,755, which, if my math is correct, represents, if you go back to the first page, what amounts to $122,000 deficit, which looks different at Christ Church than it would at other churches because of the resourcing that we have and because of some undesignated reserve funds that we have and on which we are able to draw. But you can begin to understand why we talk about stewardship and continue to talk about stewardship, because that's not a trend that can last over time for us to be able to maintain our health. That's why the matter of stewardship is so vitally important, not a side issue. It really does have to undergird everything that we do. And if you want to do the math on that, there are some things we can't determine what the income is on our investments. That's going to be other factors that determine that. The thing upon which we can have impact is our congregational offering. And if you want the math on that, I've included that as best I can include it. You see the analysis of contribution in 2024. Again, to be celebrated is that it represents $52,000 more than what people gave in 2023. But if you ever wonder where you fit in the scheme of things, we have tried our best to craft these different categories. If there's anything about this that concerns me, I'll ask you to go to the bottom of page 3 and read that paragraph. Based upon this analysis of congregational giving, of the $937,468 contributed in 2024, not including contributions to the Mission Gala, approximately 42% of that amount was contributed by 4 contributors. Every church that I've been a part of has its 4 contributors that have the wherewithal to impact a church's ministry. So I'm grateful that we have that. But if you look at how that breaks down, if there's any concern that I have, it's that in the life of our congregation, we have 4 giving units, 4 people who are giving over $30,000 a year, 4. And then you see how that breaks down. And I hope that for you, that's not for me, it doesn't ring a panic bell. It simply inspires me to encourage you to continue to reflect upon your stewardship, because it is such an important, you heard me put it this way, Jesus had more to say about money than he had to say about any other social issue. I'm not making that up. He had more to say, certainly had more to say about money than he had to say about sex. And I think that's because Jesus probably understood that money ultimately is more intimate for people than sex is. I don't mean to be flippant about that, but there is an intimacy about people's relationship with their money. And I think Jesus had a keen understanding that if we want to get at people's heart, you had better include some conversation about their financial resources. So, and so people will say, well, quit begging me for money, I've heard. I will never beg anybody for money. I'll simply remind you that if you value the ministry of the church, if it's something that's important to you, then I will simply always invite you to make sure that that importance, that valuing is reflected in your generosity, so that your generosity becomes part of your spiritual life. And I need for you to know this, friends. I would not be encouraging you to do this if this were not something that Tara and I were practicing alongside of you. Brandon asked me recently, I don't hear much talk about tithing in the United Methodist Church. Is it illegal in the United Methodist Church to talk about tithing? I said, no, it's not illegal. It's kind of out of vogue, but it's not illegal. And if you're not familiar with that concept, it's this idea, it's not a mandate in the Bible, but that there is this biblical witness that as a sign of sacrifice, we'll give 10% of our income to the ministry of the church. That's the biblical witness, and that's what many churches encourage, and what United Methodism has encouraged, 10% of our income. And do you know the question over the course of 3+ decades of ministry that I've received more than any other concerning the matter of generosity and giving? Is tithing on the net or the gross? It's the question that I have received more frequently. Now, I will add that usually the person asking that question is not doing either. So I normally say, why don't you, if you're looking to start, why don't you start on the after-tax income? Start with that. See what God does with that. and then see what happens. And that's something that, and the whole concept of tithing for many of you, and I know this, but for many of you would sound like a foreign language. That's why when Brandon and Laura and I have these sorts of conversations, Kingsley, Daniel, others, when we have these conversations, we say, okay, don't make it into a formula. How about the idea of growing from where you are? And do some inventory on that every year. And this is just our discipline. I want you to know about this. But every year, Tara and I, around fall, when we know that Commitment Sunday is happening, we do some math on what we anticipate our income being, our combined income being in the next year. And we say, okay, let's take 10% of that and let's commit that to the ministry of Christ Church. So know that that is our practice. And then we say, okay, we've got a gala coming up. So then growing beyond tithing, what is it? And I'm grateful that I'm married to somebody who has this spiritual gift of generosity. And please, this might make some of you uncomfortable to talk about, but I share this with you not to say, hey, look at how generous I am. It's more to make the point, if I can do this, pretty much anybody can do this. That's really how I look about it. That's really how I look at it. And I'm grateful to be married to somebody for whom giving is that kind of a joyful spirit. And I hope that you will be all on board in terms of just making stewardship in general more a part of our conversation, more a part of our culture. It takes more than a meeting like this, it takes more than a conversation. But a big part of that is being clear about where we are as a church. And that's what we want this year-end report to be, an indication to you of where we are. And there's much to celebrate here, folks, much to celebrate. But there is also some growing to be done. And I'll simply ask you to join me in that process. Any questions about this year-end report and what it reflects? Anything that I might be able to address quickly? All right. Well then, you certainly have been, well, I'll say just a quick word, and there might be some people from Washington Heights that are, no detailed reports concerning the Washington Heights campus to offer, but I want our folks at Washington Heights and I want our folks at Park Avenue to know that that conversation about the property, and there is a complex story that many of you know better than I do that goes all the way back to 2015, maybe 2014, that has led to this merger that has made us that has deepened our heart as a congregation that we can be one church in two campuses, Park Avenue and Washington Heights. And especially in this culture and the conversations that are happening, I've never been more grateful for our Washington Heights campus and Mickey Correa, Reverend Mickey Correa's leadership there. I celebrate, by the way, that there were 35, maybe more than that, people from Park Avenue that went out to Washington Heights for a special Epiphany service in early January. And what a day that was, what a time that was. And I think the people of Washington Heights sensed, oh, this is good for us to be together. I think the people from Park Avenue sense this is good for us to be together. So I've never been more grateful for that campus, but you do need to know that there's an unsustainable reality at present, and that is for us to have these two buildings that are expensive and huge, and one of our buildings here at Park Avenue is in better shape. I would say that to the Washington Heights congregation as well. They would acknowledge it, the Washington Heights campus as well. So our trustees, we have formed a team, an inter-campus team of a small group of trustees, a group of leaders from Washington Heights, Reverend Mickey, yours truly, some staff people, Holly from Nido, and we've begun a conversation so that all of us at least know the same information, and so that we're exploring these things together. And there's nothing to report on that yet, but there are some timetables concerning inspections about which we're very concerned. And what's going to happen when, we need to get a more professional analysis of what the total cost of making the building safe again. We know that it would be $3+ million just to do the exterior. But the interior, if you've ever been to Washington Heights and explored its depth, it's going to be at least $4 million, $5 million. So when you think about that kind of expenditure, it raises the spiritual questions of stewardship. How do we invest our dollars? And that's something that we're exploring many different options, and you'll hear more about that. We'll keep you informed. There's nothing to share yet, but know that that conversation is moving into a different kind of intensity. But this is what I want you to hear. We keep preaching this. We have these governing priorities that we will honor no matter what. We want to care well for the Washington Heights portion of our congregation. And that's the right way of saying it. Not the Washington Heights congregation, but the Washington Heights portion of our congregation. We want to care well for them and their spatial needs and their ministry needs. We want to care well for Nido de Esperanza, which we desperately want to be a part of the ministry of Christ Church, because that's one of the most high impact ministries that our church offers. We birthed that ministry, and yes, they're their own not-for-profit now, but that doesn't make them any less a part of us. So we want to care well for the Washington Heights portion of our congregation. We want to care well for Nido and its continuing ministry, and we want to care well for the stewardship of our resources. Those are our priorities, and those will continue to be. So Washington Heights folks, if you're listening, know that that is on our hearts, and we don't want it simply to be a quick process. We want to clarify what are our options related to maintaining ministry and continuing ministry and reinvesting in ministry. You will hear more about that on the horizon, because we know that that is going to be important. I'll ask you to take a look. They don't need to be elected. They already have, but we have a leadership slate that was elected at the church conference in November. Simply want to thank them. You know, that anyone, when they're called upon, says, yes, I'll serve on a church committee. That's a gift to my spirit. And so I'm grateful for all of those. And you see that the new positions, the new members of the committees are in red. But if any of you have any questions about that, you might ask, how do these committees get formulated? Well, there is, according to our Book of Discipline, a committee on nominations and leadership development, which is the only committee in the life of the church that the senior pastor chairs. It's the only committee in the life that I chair. That is the committee on nominations and leadership development. So we meet in the summer and into the fall in preparation for the church conference. And I wish you could have been the fly on the wall. We met at the parsonage, and we can't put everyone on a committee at one time, and not everyone, quite frankly, wants to be on a committee, and that needs to be acknowledged as well. And not everyone is maybe poised, or what we need. We try to give attention to diversity, and do the committees reflect that? And hopefully you will see some of that in our a commitment to that in our committee life. But the Committee on Nominations then puts together this leadership slate as a recommended leadership slate, a slate of nominations, and then the church conference does the electing. And so these good people have all been elected, and I am grateful for those who are serving in this capacity. And then I'm going to, because you've been listening to my voice a lot, I'm going to call upon Brandon, our Director of Communication and Program, to maybe give us some quick updates on some of what's on the horizon.
I will spare you from a long talk, but I wanted to talk about two things that are coming up really soon, and then two things that I'm really excited about in the next year. We're about to enter into the season of Lent. We have two great Lenten offerings coming up, one of which is our Lenten Faith Forum, which is on the hymns of Charles Wesley. This is going to be a special forum to explore the theology and depth of those hymns. That's going to be on Sunday mornings at 10 a.m. if you want to be a part of that. Katie's also co-leading that group. So definitely check that out. Also, Thursday nights in Lent is coming back. 6 o'clock each week, every Thursday in Lent, we'll be having our Lenten soup supper, followed by contemplative service at 6:45. These evenings will be full of beautiful music, prayer, and a short message focusing on different saints in the church. Many of you participated in our Lenten devotional that Tyler put together this year, which focused on saints in our own lives. And so we'll be talking about some saints in the church during the Thursdays in Lent. Next up is, Tyler talked a little bit about this, Eric talked a little bit about this, but expanding our retreat ministry is what we're thinking of kind of calling this. But our day retreats that we talked about, we want to continue building on this momentum. These retreats allow us to dive into interesting topics that speak to our current moment, which I think is important, offering a unique space for reflection, conversation, and renewal. This will be an opportunity for us to really experiment and create a different kind of spiritual space throughout the year that invites curiosity, creativity, and deep engagement. So I ask that you just keep looking for those and signing up for those. I think you'll enjoy it. And then finally, just to speak to the impact that Lydia and her work has had on Christ Church. and how important the growth of families, children, families, and youth are to the growth of any church, and how providing the kind of space where families know that they're not just welcomed here, but that we're providing enriching content for their children and youth. So throughout this year, we're going to do VBS again. We're going to continue to experiment with youth, doing a lock-in and some other things throughout the year. If you want to volunteer in those things or you want to be a part of those things, we just ask that you would support us as we continue to do that and showing these families that we care about them and that there's a place at Christ Church for them.
Do you want to talk about mission and core values as we move to the next slide?
Yeah, I can talk a little bit about that. Eric and I, along with some people on leadership and the staff, have been talking about the importance for us in the next year to revisit our mission and core values. Not necessarily changing our core values that much or going in some completely new direction, but thinking about what these values are and how to communicate them in the current moment that we find ourselves in. And so this year we're going to be looking at our mission and core values like, do we have the right ones? Are we headed in the right direction? Do these meet the moment of what the church needs to be in 2025 and beyond? And so as a part of that, we want your input. We want to know what our people think. We want to know what our congregation thinks. We want to know what our leadership teams think. And so throughout the year, we're going to be doing not only another full church survey like we did 2 years ago, but we're going to be doing smaller surveys about specific things, the first of which is on our 5 current core values. In your program, there's a QR code that goes to a survey that is 5 questions for you to fill out that really just helps us get your opinions on our core values, what you think are core values that we might be missing out on, and just a little bit about you speaking into that process with us. And so we would love for your input there.
Excellent. Thanks, Brandon. And I will also say we had a really robust conversation as a staff last week about these matters, about mission and core values. And you will see on page 6 what we tease out of that. Remember, core values are not an effort to, well, let me back up to say, I love the fact that whoever it was, and maybe it was some folks in this room, whoever it was that decided to make the mission of the church to love God above all things and to love neighbor as self, brilliant, because it's biblical. Not a bad idea to start there. And Jesus tells us that there's no commandment that is greater than these. So why not make that our vision for who we want to be as a community? Well done. And I find no reason to, yes, we can revisit that, but really it's for the purpose of saying, what does that look like and what does that mean to love God above all things in our current climate, to love neighbor as self in our current climate? That's an important question, but I love that is the stated mission. The core values led to a really good conversation at staff, and teasing out of that, remember, core values doesn't cover everything. We could list 100 things that are important to us, but it's really trying to determine what are those fundamental priorities out of which everything else comes. For example, this is what worship is the core of our life. And by the way, we could use your help, because if we use an adjective for worship, that is tricky. We found that as a church staff, so I didn't even include an adjective. This is a working document, by the way, just to give you an idea. Worship, and I love that is really at the outset, because I believe in that wholeheartedly. Not just our worship services, but everything that we do, every committee meeting, every social activity should have doxology, praising God as its heart. So that is an important thing. But we then began to talk about dynamic hospitality. Dynamic hospitality is why we have ushers and greeters and why we make that a priority, because we want people to feel welcomed in this place as soon as they walk through the door, maybe even before they walk through the door. Intentional inclusiveness is why we're a reconciling congregation and why that's important to us. It's why we have a beloved community circle. So you begin to see those important things are critical because they emerge from this core value of intentional inclusiveness. Radical generosity, well, we've just had a big conversation about that. If we're going to change the culture, then there needs to be a spirit of generosity that impacts everything. Why would people volunteer for anything if they weren't moved to be giving with their time and their energy? Why would people offer any of their financial resources if they were not growing in generosity? And then faithful discipleship is the heart of our relationship with Jesus. I think talking about that in some way is important because the mission of the United Methodist Church is to make disciples of Jesus for the transformation of the world. That's the mission of the denomination. And so I like reflecting that in our church's mission. So thank you, Brandon, for the invitation. I hope you will visit that. Give some thoughts as to what you think our core values need to be, because that's an ongoing conversation. And there's no rush on it. That's the beauty of it. There's no rush on it. But we want our core values to reflect who we are at present. So thank you for giving your attention to that. Wanted to say just a brief word about a time for casting vision, expanding mission, and outreach opportunities. You know, I'm really thankful for my friend Liza, because she, maybe in a moment of weakness, but I choose to say in a moment of daring vision, said yes to being the chairperson of our outreach committee, or it gets called different things, but our outreach and ministry or mission committee. And I'm so thankful, because if you know Liza, you know she brings energy and know-how. And she, you know, I sent her some information about a VIM, volunteer and mission training that's happening, I think in March coming up. And I get this email back, oh, I've already registered and I'm hoping to have some other people join me from Christ Church. It's training for people who want to be involved in volunteer mission teams and helping churches to do that. Because part of what COVID blew up was, I think, Christ Churches and many churches travel ministry, mission trips. And we really have a sense that we want to reinvest in that, but that takes leadership. So I would like to cast a little bit of that vision here by saying we want that to be a critical part of our ministry, not only to New York, but beyond New York. And I think Liza's leadership and outreach committee is going to help us to realize that. So we wanted to place that before you. And I'll invite, Tyler had said he wanted to talk about some other things in terms of casting vision. What Janet said about energy and excitement, it's real. I feel it, I sense it. And I think that has to do not only with expanding program, but also deepening our spiritual energy, increasing our spiritual depth. And I think the retreat ministry has something to do with that, but Tyler might have a couple of other ideas that he wants to share. So come on, my friend.
Just briefly, I'll kind of echo what Brandon was saying about the retreats and how they seem like such a dynamic way forward. I think in terms of figuring out what church can and maybe should, but can look like in 2025. And so when I think about the expansion or the growth of our spiritual formation, first I just want to name, we do a ton of capsule programming. I don't know if that's a real term, capsule programming, but like small batch programming, like faith forums, like confirmation class, a Faith Worth Having, the group that I lead that's interactive Bible study, more or less. We have a ton of offerings for spiritual formation that I think is rich in ways that, in a good way, is hard to realize how much we do, because no one person can do it all. I can't be at all of our spiritual formation things. I think that's a good problem to have, and I see us continuing to grow in that. Instead of having like permanent Sunday school classes or like huge comprehensive programs for spiritual formation, which is an oxymoron. You will never be comprehensively formed spiritually. Having all of these smatterings is really important. But what I want to name about the day retreats in particular is the way in which they provide a unique depth and a spiritual voice. So to go back to that beloved community day retreat, what I loved about it was that our anti-racism ministry hosted this opportunity to get together on a Saturday and learn a little bit more about what it meant to be a community that values anti-racism. But instead of offering informational workshop or a like technical, this is what it looks like, we offered a different type of counterpart that only a church could offer. We are an educated church. We know where to go to learn more about the policies, the histories, the facts. We need to be talking about that more, I think, within the church walls, but we know where to go to learn more about that. Instead, with this day retreat, we invited Shonda Jha, who's a colleague friend of mine who has done peace and justice organizing and ministry work for decades, to come and share about some of their work on ancestors and what it means to find ourselves within this ancestry some of which we need to honor and lift up and learn from, some of which we need to free ourselves from. But locating ourselves through the spiritual genealogy of the work that God has been doing for generations, even beyond our own country's history, that type of framework is so different from a lot of the conversations that we see out in the world about what it means to practice anti-racism, and really felt like a moment for us to withdraw from the world, to think about how this is a spiritual activity for us, so that we can go back into those moments in which it really matters. What does it mean to practice justice in the world? Knowing the spiritual backing that we have. So as I look at our church's spiritual formation, I don't see it growing just in terms of quantity or in terms of structure, but really in terms of depth and finding this certain presence that church can offer. That day retreat and the others the Illuminate Day retreat that we're planning for May, the LGBTQ ministry and the others that we're kind of brainstorming about in our staff work weeks. I think we'll pursue that. Like I said, a lot of people say church is dying. It is not, but certain forms are. And this day retreat felt like, oh, there it is. This is what church can offer as we move into the future, that doesn't compete with all the other ways in which people connect and grow and do spirituality outside of church, but offers something different. If I had another 30 minutes, I'd talk to you about how I think art and creativity and interactive installation work should be another heartbeat of our expanded spiritual formation. But I think you already have gotten a glimpse of that from knowing the type of ministry I do. But the point there is, instead of just putting information up here or doing work, church, I think, can offer creative, artistic, and interactive experiences that provide the depth that spiritual formation goes after. We're doing it here, and I'm excited to continue.
I saw the power of that. Some of you remember, speaking of travel ministry, Jared Goldfarb, longtime connection to Christ Church in that he was the facilitator or the guide for many of this church's trips to the Holy Land, Israel and Palestine. And when he came for that day, and some of you were a part of it, it was a morning and an afternoon on a Saturday, and then a continuation on Sunday. And I was stunned. I didn't know how many people would respond to that in busy New York City. But given the subject matter and given the connection with Jared, there were 30 people, 35 people who stayed with that. And so to Tyler's point about the retreat spirit, there's something right about that. And I love Laura, who is the incoming chair of our leadership council, we're already have on the calendar a day retreat for capturing some of that, a leadership council doing some work that goes beyond just a nightly or a nighttime meeting, and capturing some of the spirit of retreat that I think needs to be a part of our planning. So I think that's a vision that we need to continue to develop for sure. And then you see that I've listed there because I want this to be a priority for us, becoming a more inclusive staff. I celebrate that our staff is inclusive in many significant ways. But given where we are as a culture, I think we would miss something important if we did not continue to make it a governing priority to expand our church's inclusiveness, especially when it comes to racial, ethnic identity and gender. Someone whose perspective I greatly value said to me, "It's been a while since I've been part of a church," and it wasn't meant as a criticism, but it's been a long while since I've been part of the church, and I don't see myself on the platform. I don't hear my voice. And so your SPRC, along with your senior minister, have been working really hard at identifying that priority. What does it mean to bring a clergy woman of color onto our church staff? Violet, who had become a trusted and a beloved colleague and friend, it's been almost a year and a half since Violet was here. And our staff has expanded in some significant ways, but that is still something that we are missing. And this is not simply a wish list, but when you think about the kind of church that Christ Church is, and when you think about the kind of rhetoric that some of which I was referencing in my sermon today, think about the kind of rhetoric that impacts racial, ethnic justice in New York City and beyond. This is the way I've been putting it to SPRC, and I hope this doesn't sound irresponsible. We don't have the budget for a staff person, but we can't afford not to do it. We can't afford not to do it at this present time. And I was very close, and some of the people here I haven't had a chance to talk with about this, but we had a really significant, I've been participating in a number of conversations with clergy of color, female clergy of color, and it's not materialized. There's been one thing or another that has prevented it. And we had the most hopeful conversation that I've had recently. I've had one of the more hopeful conversations with somebody that I thought was just, would be a great blessing to us in a number of different ways. And not serving a church presently, but serving in an organization, I thought it was really going to be a good thing, and was really almost ready to call Barbara Kirka and say, let's add this to the agenda, because I want the SPRC to take this conversation then to the next level of exploration. Simeon Law, our district superintendent, called me just last night and said that because of what this person discerns in her own life, something about which she was initially excited she could not open her life to right now. Not saying that she can't do it down the road, but she can't open her life to it right now. And to be honest with you, I was crestfallen. I really was, because I sensed that it had some energy. So what I want you to hear out of all of that is that that is a priority for me. I'm going to ask you to hold me accountable for that. I don't think you'll have to, but I want you to. And because it really is a matter of helping our staff to be, at this point in time, everything that the Christ Church staff needs to be. And I want the staff to reflect. And please know, I don't want to tokenize either the staff position or the person occupying it. It's not about that. But it's about becoming the sort of staff that reflects our deepest and clearest vision of who we believe God is calling Christ Church to be. So know that continues to be a priority, and I'll continue talking with seminaries. And if some of you have some voices that you want to bring into that, there's nothing wrong with just, I want to be permission giving that way, because it's very much in the exploration stage, but we want to move from exploration to reality, and we want to make that a continuing priority. So please receive that as a bit of vision that I think is essential for us as a congregation. With that, I'll simply ask and thank you for your patience. We've talked about a lot. Are there any really quick points or questions that you want to voice? I don't want to silence any voices that way before we conclude with a time of recommitment and prayer. Anything that you want to say for the good of the order? Yes, Laura.
I just think timing-wise, it'd be really helpful if people could do the QR code in the survey in the coming week. Like, it's not an April.
Don't let it linger. Yeah.
To have that information for the 11th would be really helpful.
So Laura has said that so as not to allow this task to linger, maybe sometime this week, make it a priority to go to the QR code and respond to those 5 questions, because your input on that will be important not only for the upcoming Leadership Council meeting, but for our continuing conversation as a church staff as well. So thank you. That is a good word. Anything else? Yes, Sir Kingsley. That's it. That's you. Your new title. Your new title. A Jedi Knight. True that. True that.
God knows we try, but we can't do everything. But what is that scalable way where if people need what I would call English,
Yeah.
that kind of comes.
So that is it. No, but I'll just say thank you, Kingsley, and I so appreciate your voicing that. So just in case you didn't hear all of the question, Kingsley's asking for a scalable way. You know, we talk a lot about our outreach programs, which are important, but he coined a word that maybe he didn't coin it, because I've heard it and I like it, because it is in reach. We talk about outreach, but there is also in reach. How do we care for the people who are here? And when we talk about in reach, we're talking about congregational care. And one of the iterations of the job description that the SPRC has seen with like a new clergy position, you know, there are three major areas that I think require staff leadership for which no particular staff person is primarily responsible right now. We're sort of caring for it in an all-hands-on-deck manner. One of those areas is congregational care. Who's the point person to Kingsley's question? If someone's going through hell, if somebody's life is falling apart, or looking at it from the other way, if somebody just, you know, we gave birth to this new life and we want the congregation to celebrate it. So who's the point person who receives that? And right now, as a staff, we're doing our best. Lydia is taking point on that in overseeing the congregational care subcommittee of our leadership council. But there is not a staff person who has congregational care on his or her job description at present. And so that's something that certainly needs continuing conversation. And until we get there, how do we have the subcommittee caring for congregational care in a way that is the most helpful and the most expansive and the most caring for our congregation? So I love that image. I always want the congregation to be outreaching and inreaching. I think that's a good balance, and I'm grateful to Kingsley for naming that. So let's treat that as a conversation that needs to continue in a lot of different ways. Ruby, please.
I just wanted to piggyback off of that. I actually had some interaction with the congregational care team. I'd done a prayer request, and one Saturday I got a call.
Excellent.
From Amanda.
Yeah.
Hi, we received a prayer request. We want you to know that we actually prayed for these people, and she named everybody up. So this is the answer to your part of your question also. Named everybody on that prayer list that I had. And honestly, that saved me for the whole week. Because it was very meaningful. Because I didn't expect that I knew I would get prayers. I didn't expect to get a call back.
Yes.
An acknowledgement. So that's piggyback on what you're saying. It's happening.
Such a beautiful. No, that is excellent. So in case you didn't hear that, and for those of you who might be online, Ruby was sharing that she turned in a prayer request. We're talking about congregational care. She turned in a prayer request and at some point received a call back from our church's congregational care team saying, we received that, we're praying for you. And that's to Kingsley's question, who do we call that way? And the fact that that happened bears witness to the fact that there is potential for congregational care on which we want to build. We want to expand that. So thank you, Ruby, for that. And then, yes, well, let's go over to Beth here, and then we'll come up here.
On that, the Congregational Care Subcommittee. And I know one of the things, we haven't figured out how to do it yet, but we talked about not just outreach with the prayer cards, but things like for people who are single, like if you have to have a colonoscopy or you have like tooth surgery, something where you have to go under anesthesia and you need
Yep.
an escort, you need somebody to sign you out. We don't necessarily, you know, as someone who's single, I've been in a situation where I was like, I don't know who I'm going to call to come pick me up if I have to have this, if they have to put me under for this.
Yeah. So those are important. Important considerations, to be sure. Yeah, I saw, yes, please.
Very quick. Ruby, part of the reason you got a phone call is because the church has your contact information. So the challenge with the congregational care team is that we don't have current contact information. So if you are thinking about sharing or like would like you to share your cell phone or your email, I encourage you to do that with the church. Your information isn't being sold. It's
Sure.
private, and I would really encourage you to
And
check
yeah,
and see.
And to that point, it's led to some conflict because, and I get this, not all of our church members are in the same place, so we have some church members who don't want anybody to have their contact information. And we've learned that sometimes the hard way. And so it has inspired the staff to err on the side, and it can sometimes feel unkind, but it's not for the purpose of being unkind, it's for the purpose of guarding the privacy, and we don't have any way of knowing. And so making sure that we have access and explaining to people, this is simply for congregational care. We're still looking for a way to gather that information so that we have the wherewithal to reach out. Even the information that we do have, I run into it as well. This number has been disconnected, or this person isn't here anymore. So all of these things go back to Kingsley's question about where do people go with their congregational care concerns, and do we have systems in place? I think part of what's being communicated is that we are getting there, and this conversation will inspire us to continue to make that a priority. Yes, Janice, and then we'll, yeah.
You referred to that congregational care as a component, perhaps, of the job description that you kind of formulated. They have, what else is in that job description?
What else is in that? So I have three. The question is, what is in that job description that I referenced? Quite frankly, and if Barbara can tell you about this, I've spent an inordinate amount of time over the last 2 years working with job descriptions, and so I have 3 job descriptions that include those three. That include these 3 areas: congregational care, stewardship and development, and mission and outreach oversight, having a staff point person. And I have them and then the other half of the job description is what I would call more of a pastoral generalist. Platform presence, participation in liturgy, occasional preaching and teaching, depending upon skill set. So every clergy person has to be a bit of a generalist, and then there is maybe a point of focus. And so the 3 job descriptions, and part of the reason that I did that in these conversations with people is that I never know what the skill set is. And if I have a sense, I want it to be the right person. I want it to be somebody who can just help us as a staff and help us as a congregation. Then when that's determined, we can get specific about the job description and see where the people's giftedness. But those 3 areas, congregational care, development, and mission, coordination, oversight, in my mind, those could all be justified as needing staff leadership that they do not currently have. Does that help? Okay. All right. Anything else before we? All right. Yes, please. Is that Teresa? Yeah.
Whatever it is, and I like that list that you have there, where I am in the pecking order, because I didn't even know that was a thing. You know what I'm saying? I think that people are very competitive.
Listen. It's not. Yeah, I don't. Listen. You're talking, Teresa. You're talking to this was some decades ago, but a football player and a wrestler from Western Pennsylvania. So I'm not. A little bit of competition in the air does not bother me at all. So I'm grateful for your testimony that way, and thank you for what you have shared. In terms of closure, I don't think we need to be highfalutin about it. But if you were here 2 weeks ago for worship, you saw a number of people. 5 people joined the church, and they made this promise. They stood here and they promised this beautifully absurd thing. They promised that they would support the church with their prayers, their presence, their gifts, their service, and their witness. And I don't feel the need to develop any more language than offering to you a word of challenge as to how we might move into this next season. I hope that if you don't pray regularly for Christ Church and its people and its staff and its needs, its in-reach and its outreach. If you don't do that individually, if you don't do that as a family, please do, because I'm weird enough to believe that prayer matters. And that if prayer's not changing things for us, prayer is transforming us for the circumstances. So please commit yourself to that prayer, supporting your church through prayer. Presence, showing up, making worship a priority, involving yourself, and making that one of the governing priorities of your week. Don't minimize that. Gifts, we've talked about it. Please be prayerfully reflective on your generosity. And reflect upon what Christ Church means to you as part of its leadership. Where are you in that pecking order? Where are you in the listing of how our ministry is supported financially? And where is it that God is calling you to value that more in your life? Gifts, service. Talk to Brandon, talk to any of our staff. They will have a long list of volunteer opportunities. They'll be eager to talk with you. What? You want to volunteer? You want to be an usher? You want to be a greeter? You want to serve on sharing table? You want to at sharing table? You want to come with us to Methodist Home? Absolutely. We want to create opportunities. If that's not a part of your contribution to the church, that sort of in-person volunteering, change that. And then witness, and that's kind of a strange one, but I just take that to mean, is there a consistency about the life that we live outside of this place, so that there is no inconsistency between who we are in worship and who we are every other place? That's the witness. You represent Christ Church wherever you go, whether you know it or not. And so when people look at you, do they see a holy advertisement? Do they see the kind of advertisement that gives to them an idea of what Christ Church values and what a life of Christian discipleship looks like? I leave you with that challenge. Support the church with your prayers, your presence, your gifts, your service, and your witness. I'm so thankful to all of you for making time for this today. I hope you sense that it was a good thing to be here. And I'm going to invite Tyler to come and send us forth with a blessing.
And it is a blessing that I have for us today. It's a prayer. Prayer is an expansive term. But I'm going to offer as a closing blessing a poem of sorts from a poet and spiritual leader named John O'Donohue, which if you've been on any of those weekend retreats, you've heard us use his words. And so this is a blessing called For a New Beginning. We live in a moment that feels apocalyptic, in which a lot of things feel like they're ending. But I think if nothing else, this meeting today has shown us that we are on the precipice of many good things here at Christ Church. So I hope this blessing sends you off into a day with continued energy and excitement for what is ahead. I invite us to first take a moment of stillness, moment of silence. Maybe close your eyes where you're sitting. Just notice your breath. I invite you to take a deep breath in and a deep breath out. To be grounded by your breath as you receive these words. In out of the way places of the heart, where your thoughts never think to wander, this beginning has been quietly forming, waiting until you were ready to emerge. For a long time, it has watched your desire, feeling the emptiness growing inside you, noticing how you willed yourself on, still unable to leave what you had outgrown. It watched you play with the seduction of safety, the gray promises that sameness whispered, heard the waves of turmoil rise and relent, wondered, would you always live like this? Then the delight when your courage kindled, and out you stepped onto new ground, your eyes young again with energy and dream, a path of plenitude opening before you. Though your destination is not yet clear, you can trust the promise of this opening. Unfurl yourself into the grace of beginning that is at one with your life's desire. Awaken your spirit to adventure. Hold nothing back. Learn to find ease in risk. And soon you will be home in a new rhythm, for your soul senses the world that awaits you. Amen.
Thank you all.
And everyone, sharing table doors are about to open just a few minutes, so please keep that in mind if you need to go to the restroom on another floor. All the other floors